Ever get frustrated seeing players constantly overhyped or unfairly overlooked? I've felt that way for as long as I can remember. I'm Otaman, a 25-year-old football fanatic from Iran, and I've been obsessed with football stats, rating players for over 12 years now. But here's the thing, player assessment has always been mostly subjective, based on opinions. I aim to shift it toward a more objective approach, with a system that's grounded in stats. So, about 6 months ago, I rolled up my sleeves and started building. The result, a new rating model. One that ditches bias and leans entirely on stats and math to reveal how players actually perform. After over 3 months of tweaking formulas and scales, testing them on hundreds of players, I finally landed on something that actually works and feels fair. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how my pitch performance algorithm works, step by step, and why it might just change how we judge players forever. This whole thing is broken down into three main phases. First, I'll go over all the attributes and how they are grouped, along with the positions. There won't be too many surprises in the first phase. Most of the attributes will already feel familiar. Then I'll explain the importance coefficients and how they shape the pitch performance overall rating. This is where pitch performance begins to reveal its analytical depth and set itself apart. And finally comes the heart of it all, the third phase, the game changer, where I unveil the custom formulas and scales used to calculate the rating of most attributes with precision and purpose. Alright, let's get into it. The whole model is built around evaluating attributes. I've broken it down into 36 attributes, grouped into 8 categories for outfield players. For goalkeepers, it's 22 attributes, also in 8 categories. Because let's be honest, football is a whole different game for them. A lot of outfield attributes just didn't make sense, so I dropped those and added ones that actually reflect a keeper's line of duty. For outfield players, the first category is dominance. It includes 5 attributes: ball control, also known as first touch, and ball retention, which comes right after and refers to how well a player holds on to the ball. Then dribbling, agility, and balance. For balance, think of Messi, that low center of gravity. Next is the passing category. It includes short passing, long passing, through balls, those completed passes sent between back defenders into open space. Kevin De Bruyne is well known for this. Then there's vision, crossing, set piece taking, and curl. Third category, shooting, starting with offensive positioning, being in the right place at the right time when your team's got the ball. It's about reading the game, slipping into pockets of space and putting yourself in position to either shoot or receive a progressive pass. Then there's finishing, followed by long shots. Long shots refer to the technique of shooting from distance. Andrea Pirlo is the best example. Remember how his shots weren't powerful, yet they were incredibly difficult to save? They'd rise and dip, floating and gliding with a special trajectory. That's long shots in definition. Next is shot power, which obviously refers to the pace of the shot. But it's not just for big players or those with massive legs. The technique matters too, to strike the ball sweetly. In fact, recent studies suggest that players with leaner legs may generate more power, because it's easier for them to fold their knees all the way up and release their legs like a whip. The biggest example of this is Valverde, who's been unleashing rockets with an impressive number ending up in the back of the net this season. Attempting to shoot is simply the number of times a player pulls the trigger. Then we've got volleys, heading accuracy, direct free kicks, and penalties. Now let's flip the field. Defense is up next. This category starts with defensive positioning. This time, it's about being in the right place at the right time when your team doesn't have the ball. It means putting yourself in a position to intercept, block, or even just mark an opposing striker out of play. Next up is interceptions, cutting the passing line and taking back possession. Then we've got tackling, aggression, blocking, and finally aerial duels. The second attribute in the model related to heading. The first, heading accuracy, was in the shooting category, simply being able to score headers, placing the ball where the keeper can't easily reach. This one, aerial duels, is all about winning the ball in the air while battling an opponent, rising highest, timing it right, and dominating the aerial contest. Physicality category consists of stamina, strength, and jumping. I put stamina before strength because it's the main physical attribute in football, especially these days. It's not the old days anymore. These days, referees tend to protect players much more, and the game isn't at all as physical as it once was. Even slight contact draws a whistle. Speaking of that, let me spill my guts. Have you noticed how hard it's become to truly love a player these days? The last time I felt that connection, it was with guys like Gattuso, Seedorf, Nesta, or Puyol. Now you know my colors. I'm Rossoneri through and through. One of my biggest regrets, not getting to watch the great Paolo Maldini live, back when Milan ruled Europe. The most recent spark, Kier. Much respect, Simon. And look, don't worry, I won't be biased toward Milan or my favorite players. Even before this algorithm, I always tried to be fair. But now, with it, there's no room for bias, because there can't be. Now back into it. Next up is the pace category, made up of sprint speed and acceleration. A sprint speed is obviously your top speed, and acceleration, that's how quickly you can reach that top speed. WF and SM category, which are abbreviations for weak foot, meaning how dominant they are on their weaker foot, and skill moves, simply Ronaldinho or Neymar, jogo bonito. And finally, the presence category, consisting of injury resistance and consistency. Injury resistance is basically how often a player gets injured, how long they're out. And when it comes to those hospital players, how often they actually show up on the pitch. The second one, consistency, is about how often their performances fluctuate, or whether they perform week in, week out. I call this category presence because it reflects something simple. How often are they available? And when are they really up to the task? For goalkeepers, of course, it starts with the goalkeeping category, consisting of reflexes, reach, catching, clearing, and penalty saving. Reflexes are the most important attribute for keepers, the ability to react quickly and instinctively to sudden shots or deflections. Reach is all about stretching their body to make saves, especially for shots just out of their natural standing range. Catching means securing the ball cleanly and safely rather than parrying it, spilling it, or letting it slip into the goal. Clearing is simply punching the ball away, and the final attribute in this main category, penalty saving. Then we've got the sweeping category, consisting of sweeping, referring to a goalkeeper's ability to act as an 11th outfield player by leaving their box to intercept through balls, break up attacks, and sweep the space behind the defensive line. And the other one, aggression, which just makes sense to be alongside sweeping. Next up is the passing category, consisting of short passing, long passing, and curl. Basically, a keeper's ball distribution abilities. Presence category, the only one that matches the outfield player's version, includes injury resistance and consistency. Moving on, physicality category. Goalies don't really need much stamina, so it's made up of just jumping and strength. Then comes the dominance category, which consists of ball control, agility, and balance. As for the shooting category, which includes shot power, heading accuracy, Allison and Providel are the recent reasons behind its presence. Direct free kicks, Rogerio Ceni, the big reason behind this one, and penalties. Finally, WF, which, as you already know, is the abbreviation for weak foot, Goalkeepers don't have skill moves in their category because we don't expect our keepers to pull off rainbow flicks. Time to run through the positions. There are 9 outfield ones. Starting up top, we've got the striker, the number 9. Then there's the second striker, the classic number 10 role. Some of football's biggest icons played that role. Pele, Cruyff, Cubillas, Dalglish, Platini, Zico, Maradona, Gullit, Baggio, Cantona, Bergkamp, Littmanen, Del Piero, Totti, Rooney, Muller, Dybala, and of course Messi. Now, let me say this. Messi was never a traditional winger. Under Pep Guardiola, he played some of his best seasons as a false nine. Even in all the other seasons when he played wide in a front three, he drifted inside, gravitating toward the center. He wasn't hugging the touchline, either cutting in to score or opening doors using his insane vision and dominance in the most crowded part of the field. That's what defines a classic SS. Not just a playmaker, not just a scorer, but both. A hybrid, a creator and a finisher in one. I know, that turned into a bit of a Messi tribute. I'm not a Messi or Ronaldo fan at all. I'm just genuinely impressed by witnessing what he's done throughout the years. But let's move on. Next up, winger, traditionally wearing number 7 or 11. Then there's the attacking midfielder, the creative 10. We've seen them wear 8 too. Central midfielder, also called box to box. These guys are the engine, the heart, offense, defense, everything in between. Usually the number 8, sometimes the 6. Now, a role that doesn't get enough credit, defensive midfielder. A top-level DM protects the backline, breaks up play, and orchestrates attacks. The anchor, making his team dependent on him. Think Rodri, the best example. The traditional number of the position being 6 or maybe 4. Next, wingback. As the name suggests, a blend of winger and fullback. But let's be honest, they lean more toward being fullbacks. Most wingbacks are fullbacks first, not wingers. Then we've got the fullbacks. Right back traditionally wears number 2, left back number 3. And finally, center backs, usually with numbers 4, 5, or 6. Goalkeeper, we'll get to number 1 separately because their role is a different world. Here's where we dive into the second phase of breaking down the algorithm. Now, obviously, not every attribute holds the same weight for every position. Think about it. Finishing might be crucial for a striker, but for a center back, not so much. So to account for that, I've assigned each attribute an importance coefficient based on position. It's a scale from 1 to 10. The higher the number, the more that attribute affects the final rating for that specific role. That way, we don't overvalue things that don't matter, and we make sure the skills that define a position actually carry weight. Let's dive into the importance coefficients, starting with the dominance category. For ball control and ball retention, the importance stays consistent across the board, except for one outlier, center backs. Why? Because they usually face the least pressure when receiving the ball. They've got more time and space, so these two attributes don't weigh as heavily for them. Touch is a huge sign of class. A silky first touch, clean control under pressure. It separates the good from the great. Sure, there are differences between positions, but not significant enough to shift the coefficients, so they stay the same. Now dribbling. It's important for wingers who rely on it to break past defenders and create chances. But for centre backs, it's the complete opposite. Dribbling in their zone is risky business. One bad move and there's no one behind to clean it up. So naturally their coefficient is the lowest here, by a mile. Agility follows a similar pattern. Again, it's most important for wingers who need to shift direction fast. But this time, the drop-off for center backs isn't as dramatic. Why? Because agility still matters when you're facing quick attackers. A nimble CB is a useful CB. And finally, balance. This one picks for attacking midfielders and second strikers. These roles are often the most creative and most congested. Tight spaces, quick touches, physical challenges. If you don't have great balance, you're hitting the floor or losing the ball way too often. The numbers you see in front of the dominance, they're the total sums of all the importance coefficients in it for every position. And just below that, you've got the average, giving you a quick sense of how heavily this category matters for every position. In the passing category, you can see that short passing is obviously more important for midfenders and second strikers. Long passing matters most for defensive midfielders. You expect them to be the orchestrators. Center backs are the only other position with the same importance coefficient for long passing as they have for short. Because modern center backs play a key role in initiating attacks and building up. Think of Van Dijk and those solid long balls he launches for Mo Salah and others. Through balls and vision are similarly important for offensive players and central midfielders, as you can see. I think there's a close connection between them. Only players with exceptional vision can play exquisite through balls. So, those number 10 positions are the only ones with an importance coefficient of 10. Defensive positions being far from the opposition's defensive line have a lower IC. For the record, IC is the importance coefficient. What was I saying? Defensive positions being far from the opposition's defensive line have a lower IC for through balls, but not for vision, because they can still show their vision with progressive or long passes. Crossing is unquestionably way more important for positions on the flank, especially fullbacks and wingbacks. Set piece taking's IC is low because only a few players in every team take set pieces. It's the same across all positions except strikers and center backs, since you expect them to be the target of these deliveries, not the authors. And the final one in the category is curl. Wingers and second strikers have the highest IC because you expect them to be the best of the lot with finesse shots. Fullbacks and wingbacks have high IC too, which helps them deliver more dangerous crosses. On to the next category, shooting. Offensive positioning is obviously the most important here with a 10 IC for strikers, them being the main target of final passes and need to be in the right place at the right time to finish the job. Next up is exactly that, finishing, again with a 10 IC for strikers of course. You'll notice that midfielders and the two flank positions have a higher importance coefficient for finishing than for offensive positioning, because their finishing quality is a better indicator of their shooting ability than their goal-scoring instincts. Center backs, meanwhile, have the same IC for both, since they need solid positioning to be effective targets on set pieces. For long shots, wingbacks and fullbacks have a lower IC. They operate on the flanks and get fewer chances to shoot from distance. Strikers also have a relatively low IC here. They're usually too close to the opposition's box. Interestingly, I gave center backs a relatively high IC for long shots, because it can be a great indicator of their shooting ability. Now shot power, where strikers take the highest IC. Naturally, they're expected to be the most decisive in front of goal. Then we've got attempting to shoot and volleys, which I don't think need much explanation. Heading accuracy, as you can see, is most important for strikers and center backs, again both being regular targets from set pieces. Direct free kicks get the same IC across all positions. Any player can be a great free kick taker, and it's a solid indicator of shooting quality. And finally, penalties, taken mostly by offensive players, since they are the ones expected to score goals. The IC is naturally higher for them. Next up is defense, and we have an exception. Center backs getting the lowest ICs all the way here and having the ultimate job of defending need higher than standard ICs for defensive attributes to help better reflect their quality and overall rating. That's why they get a 15 IC for defensive positioning and 13 for the rest, except aggression. Interceptions are most important for defensive midfielders, who get a 10 IC, just behind center backs, because it's a great indicator of their defensive awareness, having to secure the space in front of that back line. Then we've got tackling, aggression, blocking, and aerial duels, all needing no further clarification. If you take a look at the category as a whole, you'll see this pattern. Center backs have the highest IC sum by far. Next are defensive midfielders and fullbacks with similar totals. Then come central midfielders and wingbacks, again with close but lower sums. And finally, offensive players, with attacking midfielders among them having the lowest sums. This clearly indicates 4 lines, each with different defensive responsibility weights. We arrive at the physicality category. Obviously, stamina is very important for box-to-box midfielders, wingbacks, and fullbacks, since they have to cover almost the entire length of the pitch. For the next attribute, we need our striker, midfielders, and especially our center backs to be strong. And the low ICs show that jumping isn't a very telling attribute overall, but its higher IC for center backs and strikers is directly tied to heading and aerial duels, because of course it helps them to be more effective in the air. For pace, you'll see that speed matters most on the flanks, and next for strikers, who need to run in behind the defensive line. For attacking midfielders making decisions and defensive midfielders making interceptions, acceleration is more important than sprint speed. They need quick bursts of explosiveness. They're not usually in situations where they have to outrun players over long distances. Let's move to the next category. Weak foot dominance is a clear sign of quality, and it's especially valuable for offensive players who need to be unpredictable in tight spaces. Trivela, using the outside of the foot, can sometimes make up for a weaker foot, but being able to pass, shoot, or dribble effectively with either foot makes a huge difference. The other one, skill moves, isn't exactly essential in football, but when used right, usually by flair wingers, it can light up a game. Time to talk presence. Injury resistance and consistency are both crucial, no matter the position. But availability comes first. If a player isn't on the pitch, form doesn't even get a chance to matter. Here's something to note. Each player's pitch performance card will display the average score for all 8 categories. Now, the importance coefficients of goalkeepers. In the goalkeeping category, reflexes stands out, by far the most important attribute. It carries an exceptional IC of 40. Why? Because it directly reflects how well a keeper reacts to shots and ultimately how easily he lets the ball cross the goal line. In the next category, we've got sweeping with an IC of 10, the same as reach, catching, and penalty saving. Aggression, however, has a much lower IC of 2. Clearing isn't considered as important, since it's more of a secondary duty for goalkeepers. That task mainly falls to the defenders. Ball distribution is a big deal for modern goalkeepers. That's why both short passing and long passing get an importance coefficient of 6. Curl, on the other hand, it doesn't really matter for goalkeepers, but it had to be included. Because of the smaller sum of all attributes importance coefficients in goalkeeper position, injury resistance and consistency ICs in presence category had to be cut by 2 compared to outfield players, bringing them on 8 and 7 ICs. Jumping and strength under the physicality category come with 5 and 4 importance coefficients. Jumping gets the edge, naturally more important for a goalkeeper, so it comes first. Then we've got dominance, 5 IC for ball control. Just like distribution, it's become more important for modern keepers, but not as key as passing. They're not usually swarmed by pressing attackers. Next up, agility, 4 IC. Might seem a bit high, but I think explosive movement can be a game changer, especially in situations like one-on-ones. And finally, balance, 1 IC. It just had to be there. But let's be honest, keepers aren't weaving through traffic or dancing on the ball. They're sprawled on the ground half the time, hardly a balance drill. In the shooting category, shot power gets a 3 importance coefficient. It's handy for launching those driven long passes. Heading accuracy, direct free kicks, and penalties, yeah, not so much use for a goalkeeper, but they had to be included. So they each come with a humble 1 IC. And finally, weak foot, the only category with just one attribute, and it comes with an IC of 3. The thing is, unlike outfield players, not every category average or score will show up on a goalkeeper's pitch performance card. Instead, the 8 scores displayed will be every goalkeeping attribute, reflexes, reach, catching, clearing, penalty saving, plus the category scores or averages for sweeping, passing, and presence. Now, to calculate the overall pitch performance rating, we need the sum of all 36 attributes' importance coefficients. This total gives us each position's final divisor. Each of the 36 attribute scores gets multiplied by its importance coefficient. We sum them all up, then divide by the position-specific divisor. That gives us the total average, or in other words, the overall pitch performance rating. Simple math. But there's one very important adjustment. Center backs tend to score way lower in the first 3 offensive categories, and usually struggle in the pace category too. So their overall rating often ends up way below other positions. To balance that out, we give every center back a plus 2.5 boost to their overall rating. This way, the rating better reflects their actual quality and level of play. On the flip side, goalkeepers end up with a score much higher than the standard. Why? They only have 22 attributes, many with low importance, but the ones that define their role carry extremely high coefficients. So to keep things fair, we subtract 2.5 from every goalkeeper's overall rating, just to put them on the same scale as the rest. Now, we've arrived at the final phase, phase 3. How do I actually calculate, or in some cases determine, each attribute's score? It all comes down to logic, formulas, and carefully built scaling systems. One important thing to note, almost all of these stats we use are measured per 90 minutes, not per game. So if a player plays 60 minutes in 3 matches and comes on for the final 30 minutes in 3 others, that's still a total of 3 full 90s. Even though it happened over 6 games. Why? Because this gives us reliable numbers, and it's fairer to players who don't always get the full 90. It levels the playing field. Starting with ball control. To calculate it, we use 2 stats, miscontrols and controls, both per 90 minutes. Here's how it works. Ball control is calculated by subtracting the result of miscontrols per 90 minutes multiplied by the position coefficient divided by controls per 90 minutes from 100. As I said, PC in the formula stands for position coefficient, which obviously is different for every position. You can see the number gets smaller going up in the field, minimizing the effect of their number of miscontrols or heavy touches. That's because it's way more difficult for offensive players to control the ball easily, being under constant pressure from defenders and midfielders, who are obviously better tacklers and physically strong. But there's something to point out here. Left and right center backs in back 3 systems are still treated like every other position, but their position coefficient is much higher, of course. Why is that? Because they can almost turn into fullbacks or even midfielders. Sounds wild, I know, but it's exactly what we're seeing at Inter, especially when they face weaker sides. And I hate to admit this, being a Rossonero and all, but Bastoni and Bisek genuinely become a major lever in driving the team forward. That said, this doesn't apply to goalkeepers, center backs in a back 4, or the central center back in a back 3. For these 3 roles, the raw number from the formula needs to go through a scale, to get a fair score, because they rarely miscontrol the ball. They face way less pressure from the opposition, especially in today's game where center backs on big teams often touch the ball more than anyone else, building up and all. So there's a massive gap between their number of controls and miscontrols. To better reflect their real ability, scaling was necessary. So for example, if the raw score from the formula is 0.65, their ball control score becomes 75. As you can see, the scale is not linear, and that will be the case for almost all these scales we use. These are called piecewise non-uniform scales. Now you might be asking, why not just go with a linear one? Great question, because reaching excellence in anything, not just football, takes serious hard work, unshakable consistency, and real talent. Every step forward becomes harder than the last. So for example, the range to reach an 80 to 90 score will be narrow and difficult, and 90 to 99 even narrower and more difficult. That's for the elite. On the other hand, when you're at the lower end of the spectrum, progress happens much faster. We've all felt it. Like when you hit the gym for the first time. You gain a ton of strength in those first few months. That's the logic behind our scaling systems. Now, there's something important here. I'll give badges to every player's highest score in each attribute, in 3 colors: gold, silver, and bronze. And if his score ends up too low, some attributes will get a brown badge. Now, if a player's ball control score is between 88 and 99, they earn a gold feather badge. Feather being a metaphor for that silky smooth touch. If it's between 85 and 87, they get a silver badge, between 82 and 84, a bronze one. But if the score falls between 40 and 71, the player gets a trampoline badge. For the 3 special positions we talked about, the numbers are different. For center backs, it's below 67, and for goalkeepers, below 59. You don't expect them to be as good at controlling the ball, of course. By the way, you see that our lowest score is 40, which makes sense. We're talking about professional and mostly world-class players here. This applies to all attributes, except injury resistance, because even world-class players can spend most of their careers in the hospital. I'm not here to shame them, it's mostly out of their hands, but you know who I'm talking about. Now trust me, other attributes won't take this long to explain. Ball control was one of the few tricky ones, and being the first didn't help either. I had to walk you through a lot of the groundwork, so bear with me. These upcoming formulas and scales took me months to develop and perfect. So, on to the next one, ball retention. It's calculated by simply subtracting the number of times a player gets dispossessed per 90 minutes from the number of times he makes progressive carries per 90 minutes. Then we drop the result into this scale. For instance, if a player's number from the formula is 2, which lands exactly between 82 and 83, we'll give him an 83. And this will always be the case. If a player's score sits right between 2 numbers, he gets the bigger one. But there's an adjustment for center backs. Their ball retention score will drop by 6 points. You know why. We've already talked about it. They face way less pressure. And the badge for ball retention is magnet, for both excellence and struggle in holding onto the ball. With the difference that for a brown one, it is like poles repelling each other. It'll be awarded using the same score ranges as ball control for gold, silver, and bronze. But brown, that simply goes to scores from 40 to 69. Third one, dribbling. We begin with successful take-ons per 90 minutes plugged into this scale right here. But that's just step 1. The raw number feeds into this formula, refining the score. Because come on, you didn't really think I'd rate dribbling just by quantity, did you? Of course not. Success rate counts too. If the dribble success rate is solid, over 60%, we add X to the score from the scale. But if it's shaky, under 60%, X gets subtracted instead. What's X? It's calculated using the player's successful take-ons percentage. The badge for dribbling is a snake. The score ranges for gold, silver, and bronze stay the same as ball control and ball retention, but this one's the first attribute without a brown badge. About agility and balance, there's no real dependable stat to measure them. So I determine these two based on the player's age, height, and weight. I will also consider their pace when determining agility. I compare the target player to many others and their scores before determining the score, to be as fair as I possibly can. These score ranges for the badges are the default we've used so far, and will continue to use for many attributes. The brown badge in this case applies only to agility. We won't have one for weak balance. Agile players get a squirrel badge, lumbering players an elephant. And for balance, a sumo wrestler fits the bill. Now, I did think about making a badge for weak balance. There were obvious options, but here's the thing. Many tall players ended up with low balance scores. Giving all those professional athletes that badge just didn't sit right, so I dropped it. We get to the second category, passing. For the short passing score, we use this formula. We start with the player's short pass completion percentage, add their progressive passes per 90 minutes multiplied by 10, and then divide the total by a position-specific denominator to keep things fair across different roles. Why include progressive passes in the short passing score? Because precision without purpose means nothing. We reward players who don't just pass the buck. One thing to note, for goalkeepers, the number of progressive passes per 90 minutes gets multiplied by 50, not 10. Naturally, it's harder for them to deliver a high number of progressive passes. The denominators change from position to position, because the more bustling the area, the harder it is to pull off quality passes. That's especially true for strikers playing up front. They've usually got fewer progressive pass options. But we're not done yet. To determine the final score for short passing, the number from the formula goes through this scale. So let's say a player gets 70 from the formula. Their final short passing score will be 88. And the badge's score ranges will be the default for short passing. Puzzle pieces coming together will be the metaphor representing how short passes link up to shape a team's play. And for players who don't spot their teammates in dangerous areas or can't deliver quality passes when they do, we've got glasses. Long passing is next. We take the player's long passes completed per 90 minutes, multiply it by 10, add the long pass completion percentage, and divide the total by the position denominator. The number from the formula then goes through the same scale we used for short passing. These score ranges for long passing badges will be the default, though there won't be one for players who struggle to launch long balls. The symbol on long passing badges will be a bridge. To determine the through balls score, we simply put the number of through balls per 90 minutes into a scale. But it's a slightly more complex scale. Players with over 0.4 through balls per 90 won't be judged by position. But for those under that mark, the evaluation splits into two groups, defensive and offensive. Because obviously targeting the space behind the opposition's defensive line is a tougher task for players far from it. One quick note, wingbacks usually don't have wingers ahead of them, so naturally they complete fewer through balls. To keep things fair, we give their score a push, an extra 4 points. Through balls to me are one of the clearest signs of football intelligence and vision. Players who can consistently pull them off, they've got my respect. And honestly, you might be surprised, some big names don't score as high in through balls as you'd expect. So I decided to go a bit easier when it comes to badge rewards for this attribute. Players who score between 86 and 99 get a gold badge. 83 to 85 earn silver, and 80 to 82 pick up bronze. The badge itself, a key on a door-like frame, because these players are the key holders. They open doors for teammates struggling to unlock defenses. Now, vision itself, and the fact that we include 4 different statistics to calculate its score just goes to show how important it is. Vision equals the number of key passes per 90 minutes minus completed crosses into the box per 90 minutes divided by 2, plus not the number, but the through balls score divided by 100, plus progressive passes per 90 minutes divided by 10. So why subtract crosses from key passes? Because crossing doesn't require much vision. A lot of flank players with a strong crossing rack up deceptively high key pass numbers, since successful crosses get counted as key passes. That can be misleading. So this adjustment helps make sure we're actually rewarding real vision. The number that comes out of the formula then goes through this scale, giving us the final vision score. The badge is a pair of binoculars, and the score ranges stay at the default. No brown badge here either. If you've stuck around and liked it so far, drop a like. It helps more fans discover honest football analysis. Crossing is calculated by first multiplying the number of completed crosses into the box per 90 minutes by 100, then adding the completion percentage of crosses. This sum is then divided by a position denominator, which as you can see is very different for right and left center backs in a back 3 formation compared to other center backs. And you already know why that is. Once we've got the number from the formula, we drop it into this scale to get the final crossing score. So let's say a player ends up with 10.2 from the formula. That falls exactly between 95 and 96 on the scale. So the score becomes 96. Set piece taking is one of the few attributes I determine manually. I look at a mix of factors: the player's crossing score, how many set pieces and corners they take per 90 minutes. Well, corners are set pieces too. I also glance at their track record with free kicks. Curl is another attribute that doesn't have a clear stat behind it. So for this one too, I'll be the judge. Based on watching the player, their technique, and how often and how much they bend the ball effectively, I'll assign the score myself. For attributes like these two, where I determine the score myself, I rely on comparison. I've rated a large number of players while building this algorithm, so I use that database to make sure each score is fair and reliable. The badge score ranges for these three, crossing, set piece taking, and curl, will follow the default, with no brown badge for any of them. Crossing and set piece taking will share one badge, a basketball hoop, symbolizing balls being dropped into the box. This badge goes to the higher of the two scores. So if a player gets an 85 in crossing and 83 in set piece taking, they'll get a silver, not a bronze. Curl's badge, as you can see, is the R2 button from game controllers. We arrive at the shooting category. To calculate offensive positioning, we add progressive passes received per 90 minutes to non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes, multiplied by 100. Then we apply this result to a scale to get the final score. Putting yourself in scoring positions carries more weight here, but making yourself available, becoming a pass destination, that's positional empathy, and it matters too. Not as much, but still important, especially for players farther from the opposition goal. The badge for offensive positioning is a compass, and the score ranges will be a bit different for this one. Gold starts at 90, silver covers 86 to 89, and bronze is from 82 to 85. There won't be a brown badge. In calculating finishing, we will have two coefficients for every position. Goals scored per 90 minutes multiplied by x plus non-penalty goals minus non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes multiplied by y. At first, I just wanted to use only non-penalty goals minus non-penalty expected goals, because that's a very, very telling stat about a player's finishing quality. There aren't many stats as telling as that, but the thing is, that way many great goal scorers would end up with a really low score for finishing. so we had to factor in goals scored too. By the way, for those of you who still don't know what expected goals are, expected goals is a number that shows how likely a shot is to score based on things like how close the player is to the goal, the angle of the shot, whether it was a header or a kick, and how the chance was created. An interesting point here is that you can spot a pattern in the two coefficients. For strikers whose primary job is scoring goals, the goal count is the least important, with a coefficient of only 100. Meanwhile, finishing quality most important, with a coefficient of 2000. And logically, as we move further away from the opposition goal, goals become more valuable and finishing quality becomes less telling. There are two exceptions though, wingbacks and centre-backs. They have lower than expected coefficients for goal count. Why? Because wingbacks often find themselves in great scoring positions. Just look at Leverkusen or Inter. Their wingbacks' number of goals is a testament to that. As for centre-backs, their goal count doesn't carry the expected value either, because most of their goals come from headers, so it doesn't say much about their actual finishing ability. I have something to add here. Non-penalty goals minus non-penalty expected goals can be negative, which indicates poor finishing. It means the player misses good scoring chances, and his number of goals isn't what was expected of him. But here's the problem. A negative value can mess up the entire formula. It simply can't function with that. So the solution is this. We'll treat any zero or negative value of non-penalty goals minus non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes as positive 0.01. Then for every 0.01 difference from the original stat, we'll subtract 50 from the y coefficient of center backs and 100 from the y coefficient of all other positions. We're not done yet. The formula alone doesn't give us the final score. It still has to go through this scale. The badge for finishing is an archery target, and the score ranges will vary across 3 different groups of positions. Naturally, we had to be more lenient with midfielders and especially center backs when it comes to finishing. Long shots are calculated by taking a player's goals from outside the box per 90 minutes multiplied by their position coefficient, plus their long distance goals, those scored from beyond roughly 30 yards or 27 meters, divided by 100. For second strikers, we use 2 separate coefficients. One for those playing as a lone striker, like Roberto Firmino, who played as a false 9 in clubs Liverpool, and another for those who operate behind the number 9. As you can see, the least valuable outside the box goals come from that second group of second strikers and from wingers, both with a coefficient of 1. Attacking midfielders follow closely with a coefficient of 1.1, since they usually operate just outside the box, giving them more chances to score from that range. This is the scale that converts the formula's output into a score. But for players with no goals from outside the box, the score will be determined manually, based on their finishing ability, overall technique, and comparisons with similar players in similar roles. The badge for long shots will be a cannon, and will be a bit more generous with the score ranges, because this is a skill few players truly master. The next attribute is shot power. And unfortunately, there just isn't a stat for average shot pace. So once again, the responsibility of scoring this one falls on me. But I assure you, I'll be as fair and unbiased as possible, watching players' shots, comparing their score to every other player with similar score. Shot power's badge is a hammer. It looks like Mjolnir actually, Thor's hammer. These are the score ranges. And wow, I'm about to hand out Mjolnir in 3 different colors to many players. That doesn't feel right. After all, the only other Avenger worthy of lifting it was Captain America, Christian Pulisic. No, I mean Steve Rogers. Jokes aside, let's move on to the next one. Attempting to shoot. Here we simply plug the number of shots per 90 minutes into this scale. Penalty kicks won't be counted. So if a player takes, say, 6.1 shots per 90, they land a score of 95. The badge for this one, a machine gun. Wally's score, similar to shot power, is the next one that will be manually scored by me. Its badge is a bat, and the score ranges are as you can see. Now, for heading accuracy, this one's calculated by taking the number of headed goals per 90 minutes, then multiplying that by a position coefficient. The closer a player is to the opposition goal, the less valuable their headed goals. Now you might be thinking, wait, why isn't the center back's coefficient way higher? That's because they're usually the main target on set pieces. Once we've got the final number from the formula, we run it through this scale. So let's say a player ends up with 0.063. That gets them an initial score of 82, because it's closer to 82 than 81. But why did I say initial score? Because we're not done yet. We still need to factor in the player's height. Obviously, the shorter you are, the tougher it is to win aerial duels and score headers. So I'm giving that difficulty the credit it deserves. Here's how it works. Players between 180 and 187 centimeters, not short really, will only get a +1 boost to their heading accuracy score. From there, every 5 centimeters shorter adds another +1. So the shortest group, those between 160 and 164 centimeters, will get the full +5 boost. The heading accuracy badge is a fighter jet, and the score ranges are as usual. Direct free kicks are scored by adding the number of direct free kick goals to the player's conversion rate, expressed as a percentage, multiplied by 10. Then we plug the result into this scale. But this formula doesn't apply to players who've scored at least one direct free kick goal in fewer than 60 attempts. That sample size is just too small to trust. For them, I'll determine the score myself. Now, for players who haven't scored a free kick at all, we look at the 40 to 69 range on the scale. Their score will be based on these three attributes: curl, finishing, and long shots using this formula. But if the score comes out under 40, we will have to follow this specific rule. I'll even consider free kicks scored in youth competitions. So for example, if a player has a 24 initial score and one under 23 free kick goal, their score gets boosted to 46, 41 plus 5. Or a player with a 37 initial score and 4 under 23 free kick goals will land on 52. 44 plus 4 multiplied by 2. Penalty taking is simple. A player's score will equal their penalty conversion rate. So if someone has scored 81% of their penalties score is 81. Straightforward. But if a player has taken fewer than 15 penalties, the sample size is too small. So I'll step in and determine the score myself. And for players who haven't scored any penalties or haven't even taken one, I'll base their score on their finishing ability. The badge score ranges for both direct free kicks and penalties will follow the standard. The DFK badge is a football sitting on a golf tee. The penalty badge, it's a snowflake, inspired by Cole Palmer, his celebration and ridiculous penalty record. Because let's be honest, to be a great penalty taker, you've got to be cold. There's no reliable stat to accurately measure a player's defensive positioning. So to rate it, I've got to rely on watching the player, having their overall defensive performance in mind, and mixing in what little we can measure, like interceptions and errors per 90 minutes, specifically errors that lead to opposition shots. The badge for defensive positioning is a sheriff's star, and these score ranges will vary across 3 different groups of positions. This time around, unlike with finishing, I had to be more forgiving to non-center backs, especially offensive positions, when it comes to defensive positioning. To determine interceptions, tackling, and blocking scores, I simply take the number of interceptions, tackles, and blocks per 90 minutes and run them through the same scale. So for example, a player with 0.9 interceptions, 0.93 tackles, and 0.92 blocks per 90 minutes will get a score of 78 in all 3. But there are 2 important adjustments to these scores. First, I'll add 1 to 3 points to the interceptions, tackling, and blocking scores of players from decent, good, or dominant teams, since these teams often dominate possession, which means their defenders have fewer chances to rack up defensive stats. So this adjustment helps reflect their true ability. I'll apply the same logic to aerial duels as well. The second adjustment is for tackling. Center backs and strikers will get a +2 boost. Since they operate at opposite ends of the pitch, they naturally get fewer opportunities to make tackles, and this tweak helps correct for that. The badge for interceptions is a no-entry sign. For tackling, it's an American football helmet, as a metaphor for a physical, contact-heavy game. By the way, why is a game played primarily with the hands called football? Anyways, for blocking, it's a shield. The score ranges for all 3 will follow the default. None of them has a brown badge. 4 stats will shape the aggression score. First, we take the percentage of dribblers tackled and divide it by 10. Then we add fouls committed per 90 minutes. Next, we add yellow cards per 90 minutes multiplied by 10. And finally, we add red cards per 90 minutes, including second yellows, multiplied by 100. Once we've got the total, we run it through this scale to get the final aggression score. This formula is tailored specifically for outfield players. For goalkeepers, I'll still take it into account, but their aggression score will mostly be determined by me, with some help from the formula, of course. Aggression's badge is a bull for the aggressive ones, and a butterfly for the soft ones. These score ranges will be split into 2 groups. One for that first line of press, where I had to be a bit more lenient, and another for everyone else. Now the last defensive attribute, though it can be offensive as well. To calculate aerial duels, we first multiply the number of aerial duels won per 90 minutes by 10. Then add the percentage of aerial duels won divided by 2. As usual, the result is converted using its own scale to determine the final score. As mentioned earlier, the score can be bumped up by 1 to 3 points depending on the level or levels of the teams the player plays or has played for. Another thing, strikers will always get a +2 boost to their aerial duels score, because more often than not, they're up against taller, stronger center backs in the air. The badge for aerial duelers is an eagle, and for those weaker in the air, a chicken. Before moving on, you should have in mind that a higher aerial duels score can improve both jumping and heading accuracy scores, because besides having balls, to be successful in the air, you need to jump high too. And being good in the aerial duels helps you be more accurate with headers as well. For jumping, I'll be the judge to decide how much boost to give. But for heading accuracy, if the aerial duels score is higher than the heading accuracy score, it will lift the heading accuracy score using this formula. The new heading accuracy score equals the first heading accuracy score plus the aerial duels score minus the first heading accuracy score divided by 2. Wow, how many times did I say heading accuracy? Now, on to physicality. Stamina score is determined simply by putting the number of kilometers covered per 90 minutes into this scale. But here's the twist. I'll give a helping hand of up to +5 points to players who score below 71, but sprint a lot, like Mbappe, who doesn't defend much or cover tons of ground, or players who earn a solid defensive score in attributes like defensive positioning, interceptions, tackling, and aggression, which all demand stamina. Take Lautaro Martinez as an example. He's not the fastest or the one covering the most distance, maybe even a bit overweight, but defensively, he steps up and really helps his teammates. And yeah, I'm being a good guy here. Cut me some slack for being fair to our enemy's captain. Now, strength. I'll determine its score by considering age, height, and weight. Jumping follows a pretty similar story. I'll also take age and weight into account, but instead of height, as we just discussed, I'll factor in aerial duels. The badge for stamina is a pair of lungs. Players with low stamina will get a badge showing a nearly empty battery. For strength, it's a bison skull, and the weaker players will carry a dandelion badge. As for jumping, the badge is a kangaroo. No badge for those who can't jump. Now pace. For sprint speed, I'll simply take the player's top speed in kilometers per hour and drop it into this scale. One of the only two linear scales I've used. These are called uniform piecewise linear scales, where the range intervals stay the same all the way through. Acceleration will be determined by watching the player and factoring in their sprint speed score, age, height, and weight. There's a natural relationship between sprint speed and acceleration. Basically, the older, taller, or heavier a player is, the bigger the gap tends to be between the two. It just takes them longer to reach their top speed. Pace badges will be a cheetah and a tortoise. But here's the catch. We'll assign the badge based on the weighted average of sprint speed and acceleration, according to their importance coefficients. Weak foot, skill moves, and consistency are the three attributes scored by stars, and I'll be the one deciding each rating. For consistency, I'll consider how many seasons a player has performed at the highest level, plus the percentage of strong and exceptional performances, especially in tough games where their team struggled but they still stood out. Honestly, I don't think anyone will earn a 5-star rating from me, except Lionel Messi. High dominance in weak foot earns a badge with 2 swords, a metaphor for a player who can fight effectively with both weapons. For skill moves, the badge is a top hat, symbolizing magicians and tricksters on the pitch. Players with a 5-star rating get a gold badge, 4.5 stars silver, and 4 stars bronze. Consistent players earn a metronome badge, while the inconsistent ones get Gattuso's legendary quote. Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit. I love that quote, and the man behind it. Consistency score ranges differ from the other two. Players with 5 and 4.5 stars get gold, 4 stars silver, and 3.5 stars bronze. Anyone scoring 2.5 or below gets the infamous Gattuso quote badge. To score injury resistance, the only attribute starting at 1 instead of 40, and I've already explained why, we divide the number of club and national games missed due to injury by the number of 90 minutes played for the club. Then the result goes through this linear scale, which is the only other linear scale besides the sprint speeds. For example, a formula output of 0.255 converts to an injury resistance score of 83. Since goalkeepers aren't outfield players, they're actually the only exception, they tend to be less prone to injuries. To reflect this, their games missed because of injury will be multiplied by 1.6. Fewer than 50 full 90-minute matches isn't a reliable sample size, so I'll use the formula as a reference. However, I'll personally decide the final injury resistance score. We're going hard on the injury resistance badge. Earning a bulletproof vest starts at a score of 88. Players scoring 79 or below will get a fragile symbol, because these guys need to be handled with care, or you won't see them on the pitch for a while. Now we arrive at goalkeeper specific attributes, starting with reflexes, the most essential quality for a keeper, with an extreme importance coefficient of 40. To calculate its score, we'll take post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed per 90 minutes and run it through this scale. For those of you unfamiliar with post-shot XG, it measures how likely a shot is to score after it's taken, based on its placement and power. Unlike regular XG, which looks at the shot before it's struck, PSXG considers where it's actually headed in the goal. In a way, it's the opposite of non-penalty goals minus non-penalty expected goals, which we used earlier to judge finishing quality. Post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed can be 0, positive, or negative. If it's 0, the goalkeeper has simply done his job. Nothing really spectacular, just a solid expected performance. If it's positive, then we're talking about a real keeper, someone who doesn't let balls fly past easily. The bigger the number, the better the performance. But if it's negative, that's bad news. It means the goalkeeper hasn't even met the basic expectations. They're conceding soft goals, ones that really should have been saved. The badge for reflexes is a cat, a symbol of those lightning fast reactions. And for poor reflexes, that's a scarecrow. These score ranges here are a little different. I want it to be fair on both sides of the scale. So a positive 0.03 PSXG minus GA will be the first to get rewarded, and the negative 0.03 will be the first to get called out. Reach simply equals save percentage plus 20. So for instance, a goalkeeper with a 71% save rate will get a 91 reach score. Simple as that. Its badge is an octopus, and I've been demanding with these score ranges here, because it's one of the easier scores for goalkeepers. Most of them naturally have high save percentages, so to stand out, you've got to be really reaching. Next up is catching, and its score is built on the foundation of two things, reflexes and reach. But it's not a 50-50 split. Reflexes do most of the heavy lifting here. 3/4 of the value comes from reflexes, and 1/4 from reach. The badge for catching is glue, for those keepers whose hands seem to have a magnetic pull, and for the ones who let the ball slip too often, it's olive oil. For clearing, it's simple. We take the percentage of crosses stopped and drop it straight into this scale. So for example, a goalkeeper who stops 7.63% of incoming crosses will earn an 86 as their clearing score. Its badge is a punch. For penalty saving, we'll take the penalty kick save percentage. That means only the ones the keeper actually saved. Missed shots and posts, they don't count. Then we run that save percentage through this scale. So for example, a goalkeeper who saves 17.2% of the penalties he faces will get a penalty saving score of 84. The badge will be a bookmark icon. And finally, sweeping. It will be measured by the number of defensive actions outside the penalty area per 90 minutes placed into this scale. The badge for sweeping is a broom. Now it's time to define the score ranges for the overall rating in pitch performance. A rating of 85 or above puts you in the GOAT tier. Its accent color, black. And honestly, I don't think we'll ever have more than one player at that level, because there can only be one greatest of all time. I already know who it is. You probably have a name in mind too. And if you're still unsure, don't worry. I'll settle that debate for you very soon. Elite players fall between 80 and 84.9, and their rating is accented in gold. These are your top 3 to 5 active players in their position. true standouts. Many of them might be considered legends or icons, depending on their achievements and the legacy they've carved out. Next comes world class, from 77.5 to 79.9, marked in red. These players are like among the top 10 to 20 in their role, though the competition can vary depending on how saturated the position is. Now you might say, how did you put elite above world class? My answer is that, linguistically, elite refers to a higher level of expertise than world class. The grade tier ranges from 75 to 77.4, and the color is orange. These are players who consistently perform at a high level, but might not always steal the spotlight. From 72.5 to 74.9, we've got the good or solid performers. Their rating is accented in green, reliable, effective, and definitely above the average. They're dependable squad members who rarely let you down. Not quite the difference makers, but still effective in most situations. Then there's average, ranging from 70 to 72.4, with sky blue as the accent color. These are players who do their job, not spectacularly, but not poorly either. Below average falls between 67.5 and 69.9, colored in blue. They might struggle to meet expectations or simply not offer much value at the top level. And finally, any player with a score below 67.4 is placed in the low tier. Their rating is accented in gray, a reflection of either raw potential that hasn't matured or performances that just haven't been good enough. Now, keep in mind, these rating ranges are defined for the highest level of football, like the top 4 leagues. So when I call someone solid or average here, that's relative to elite competition. A player in the solid or even average range by these standards could easily be a standout or even a star in a lower tier league. Context matters. Same player, different environment, and the impact can look completely different. And I'll keep that in mind when rating players outside the top level. So for those in lower leagues, I'll subtract 1 to 3 points from each calculated attribute score to adjust for the gap in quality and intensity between competitions. Before I wrap this up, there's something important I need to clarify. I'm not saying I can calculate a player's quality down to the exact number, because that would be absurd and frankly impossible. There are so many factors that affect a player's performance that we just can't measure. Things like mentality, attitude, leadership. Those aren't stats you can pull from a spreadsheet. There's no way to get a 100% precise calculation, especially in something as complex as football. You just can't. And honestly, that's true for almost everything in life. Anyone who speaks with absolute certainty about everything is usually revealing their ignorance. What pitch performance does is give you a reliable, credible evaluation based on a wide range of stats. We come as close as possible to measuring every key trait a player has, but perfection, no system is perfect. And that's what pitch performance is all about. Turning noise into clarity by letting the numbers do the talking. Now you know how the engine behind pitch performance runs. If you're still here, you probably care about football the way I do. So don't stop now. You've got front row seats. If you made it this far, drop a comment. Let me know what you think, or which player you want to see rated. And share this with anyone curious about how good their favorite players really are. Who's overrated? Who's underrated? Ready to see this system in action? Jump into the next video, where I break down the ultimate showdown. Lionel Messi versus Cristiano Ronaldo. It's arguably the most debated question in football history. And I'm finally settling it with cold, hard numbers. Let's go.